Welcome everyone to the MMA Vivisection.
Were you doing something during that long silence? I was looking at Twitter. I'm sorry.
Okay. Welcome to
what was happening just now?
How shocked you were. I'd like started the video like 10
we've begun. Okay.
And I suddenly start talking. Just like, wait, what the fuck is this? Okay. Welcome everyone to the MMA Vivisection with me, Zane Simon, and my co-host Connor Rebish. We're here to talk about this week's UFC fight card in Atlantic City, New Jersey. UFC Fight Night, Edson Barboza versus Kevin Lee. UFC Fight Night 128, all that good stuff. And it's honestly just a rock-solid, classic UFC Fight Night fight card. It's again, unfortunately, it's exactly like there's no distinguishing difference between this and the Fox card last week. Like and that's to the better of this card. That's to the, that says something good about this card, but it also is just, that's why the ratings on the overnight ratings on the UFC Fox card, despite a awesome action main event that was fantastic and otherwise a pretty fun fight card up and down, we're still bad because there's nothing to distinguish it as a product from this.
Can you say that about almost anything the UFC produces? That there's nothing to distinguish it as a product?
The only difference is that now they've realized that they only can have title fights on pay-per-view. They can't afford to put them on any other platform. Yeah. So
and the increased or revamped focus on pay-per-view as the main source of income is, I think, an explanation for why now all of the non-pay-per-view cards feel so samey.
Yeah.
Like, they just don't have the roster strength to make a Fox card look better than this card when they have to have UFC 225 look the way it does.
Yeah. No, they've very clearly steered their biggest drawing stars to pay-per-view entirely.
An eye on the future, Zane. Pay-per-view is where the industry is headed, okay? You heard it here first, all right? Pay-per-view wasn't that big in the 80s, wasn't that big in the 90s, but the numbers have been going up. So if you want to make money as a fight promotion, make sure you don't invest in Fight Pass and do pay-per-view instead.
Yeah, well, I mean, I get the satirical point that you're making.
Do you?
However,
yeah,
we have had the biggest pay-per-view numbers in history in the past like 2 years. So,
yeah. It's fine. It's fine.
You're making a very good point, but I can also see,
I mean, Zane, listen, Avatar was like the most successful film of all time.
I know.
It's just the age we live in, okay? It doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah, we've been over this.
Okay.
All right. On that note, we're looking forward to this fight night card. It's a fun card. It's got lots of fun fights on it. It doesn't actually look like it has any really bad fights on it. Even the fights that could be bad, there's enough interest in them for me that I'm just like, I don't know how the fuck Brett Johns is going to handle somebody who might be a better wrestler than him. I don't know what happens if Ryan LaFlare can just take Alex Garcia down. Like, even the fights that could be boring, I'm actually looking forward to. So, lots of questions. We're going to dive right into the bottom with a welterweight bout. Tony Martin, Keita Nakamura. Connor, take us away.
This is a good example of what you were just talking about. A fight that no one will show up for. I'm confident of that. And literally the curtain jerker, the first fight on this card, and yet a really enticing matchup. I think Tony Martin, first of all, this is Tony Martin's welterweight debut. He's been a lightweight since like 2013, something like that. He started his career at welterweight, but then quickly became a lightweight. But we've seen him struggle with the weight cut a bit, especially on his like short notice call-ups. We also have seen him,
Oh, I was going to say, I think he actually maybe went, was it welterweight? I thought for some reason that he started at middleweight for some reason. Well, I guess it was welterweight.
It wouldn't be that surprising given his like body composition.
Yeah, I thought he dropped from middleweight to lightweight in the UFC, and I was just always like, why would you not go to light or to welterweight? You're clearly a welterweight, but whatever. Yeah. He's at welterweight. So.
He's one of those guys who is somehow smaller than James Vick, but clearly far too big to make 155 pounds for the rest of his career. I described his build as a tank standing on its hind legs. And, you know, like Tony Martin too, like it's not just the weight cut, but inexperience has been an issue in the past. And we have seen him getting over that hump in recent fights. We have really seen a new Tony Martin since like the last year and a half or so, where his striking has been looking really polished. Technique has been there. He has looked, more than anything, he has looked extremely calm. He looks like nothing surprises him anymore. You know, back in his UFC debut, he came this close to submitting Rashid Magomedov, and then just adrenaline dump and got lit up for the rest of the fight.
Yeah,
and
he used to be known for gassing out hard after about a round because he was just pushing so hard.
So hard for that early finish. And now if you're, you know, like Johnny Case and you smash Martin on the chin with a big right hand in the third round, Martin will cover up, get his feet moving, get back on his jab, and return the favor. He responds to adversity much better than he used to. And so I think he's going to have a hell of a fight with Keita Nakamura. Nakamura is going to contend with Martin in basically all of the areas in which he likes to play. Nakamura is that kind of fighter. He's a respectable striker. He's got a very tricky right hook, and is just overall a better striker than he's given credit for. Not defensively, being a Japanese mixed martial artist, doesn't really have head movement at all, but he is one of those fighters who's confident in just throwing a shot when you're throwing. So if you're not careful, he'll clip you with a counter in an exchange. Of course, the back take game and the submission game in general, but especially the rear naked choke is the big thing to worry about. And I think that's interesting because Martin is a good wrestler, a pretty darn good wrestler, but Nakamura is a rare kind of back take artist where he can get one slight opening like he got in the Li Jingliang fight and turn a takedown into a very, very bad situation for his opponent. So I'm expecting we'll see Martin trying to work his striking in this matchup, which he's been doing in recent fights. He didn't want to grapple with Olivier Aubin-Mercier. I expect we'll see him, and if that's the case, then I think he does still have a reach advantage over the likes of Keita Nakamura, and he is still taller than him. I think he'll probably be able to just, because he has a good, consistent jab, get through and avoid the worst of what Nakamura has to offer as the fight goes on. So I'm going with Martin to win a decision.
I don't know. This, to me, it feels too much like the kind of fights Martin has traditionally lost a bit. And especially mostly because what we've really seen Keitaro struggle with are fighters that can really chase him down with long combinations. Because, you know, not to say that he's anything otherwise like Evan Dunham necessarily, but kind of like Evan Dunham, Keita Nakamura is he's not fast on his feet really at all, but he's got really good hand speed, and that throws a lot of people off, especially because he's willing to take punches and just kind of stand in front of you with the very, you know, Japanese Bushido, let's, you know, I'm here to get hurt and to hurt you kind of thing.
Yep.
And it has caused, I mean, it's one of the big reasons that he's such a tricky matchup for a lot of fighters is because they want, you know, a lot of fighters aren't very good combination strikers past two shots.
Yeah.
And so they'll throw a 1-2 at him and he'll just stand in and take it and then fire back a really hard right hand or left hand counter.
That's a good point.
And often that draws them into wanting to grapple with him because he's tough, he doesn't go away, and then he returns fire with hard punches. And Martin's developed his boxing, but it's a lot of jabs or like a jab cross. And then he doesn't really follow up in combination. Like even when he had, you know, there's a reason that he doesn't have any KOs at all in his whole career, even as his striking's improved. Even when he had Johnny Case hurt, he just kind of steps back. He like hits a hard shot and then just steps back to kind of think about, okay, well, how do I approach this next?
He has become like you could call him a boxer puncher because he does seem to hit pretty hard. He's got some real weight behind his shots, but he's really become like an out boxer. It's for Martin, it's all about the jab and especially the 1-2.
Yeah.
And then reset and get it to work again. And
because of that too, even Johnny Case was able to crack Tony Martin really hard. Like he was able to make Martin pay for that kind of style, that inability to really pour it on him and overwhelm him. And then on the ground, what we've seen with Martin a lot is when he'll get tied up. He's not hard to take down because he's a willing power grappler. And, you know, you look at like his fight that he had with Leonardo Santos, albeit that was a couple of years ago, but it's, other than Olivier Aubin-Mercier, the best grappler he's faced in that time since. And Santos was able to get him down and just transition right to his back and choke him out. And Olivier Aubin-Mercier was able to get him down early in each of the first 2 rounds.
Yeah, it's this weird thing where like Tony Martin is either dominating the grappling or getting like taken apart in the grappling, and that was even true in the Olivier Aubin-Mercier fight in which he was dominated in grappling.
Yeah.
Because in the 3rd round he got top position and dominated. Yeah. So like it's very difficult to tell for me, how does a Tony Martin, how is it determined that he's going to, I mean, obviously it's top position versus being stuck on the bottom, but he's not particularly good at getting from the bottom to the top.
No. And I just think that like Nakamura is a fighter who is incredibly sure of himself and how he's fighting and what he wants to do. And I don't see that out of Tony Martin yet. I see a fighter who's developing a lot of good technical skills, but his game is still very much like, you know, it's like, oh, okay, I want to be more of a kickboxer in this fight, so I'm just going to stay out at range and try to kickbox. And not going to integrate that much of my game, the rest of my game that well, because I'm not really that confident of how it's going to go. Or if you get me on my heels, I'm going to get taken down.
I'm kind of hoping we see a sharper, more consistent Martin, because to hear him tell it, he was walking around at like 205 between camps and making 155 and still managing to look better with each fight for a little while there. So I'm hoping we see 170 really refresh him, but you make a very good case.
So I'm taking Kitaro. Nakamura is a sizable underdog, surprisingly to me. He opened at plus 135, jumped up to plus 183, and has continued to trend upwards now at plus 206. Tony Martin opened at minus 175, dropped down to minus 240, and has sort of drifted down slightly to minus 257.
People always underrate the veterans, Zane.
Yeah, well, I'm just surprised. I mean, Keitaro's still impossibly hard to finish, and Martin's the one moving up in weight, so I
don't understand it either. I really don't.
That's fascinating. Bantamweight bout next, Merab Dvalishvili versus Ricky Simon. And I was watching tape on Ricky Simon, and I was like, oh man, I gotta pick him. I love his very powerful power shots into immediate takedowns, really good scrambler, just a real solid powerhouse of a fighter. And I went back and watched tape again on Merab Dvalishvili, and I don't know. I got to go with Dvalishvili here, honestly. Mostly it's just because Dvalishvili is such a tireless wrestler. And Ricky Simon, I think the big thing for me seeing, some of his fights recently, like he has success in flurrying bursts moving forward, but it's pretty clear that he doesn't want necessarily to be a natural pressure fighter.
He reminds me very much of early MMA career Henry Cejudo.
Yeah.
It's like just like flashing hands at you, staying moving. It's all about like being athletic and like process, work rate, keep it up.
But like you say, you saw his fight against Chico Camus, where Camus was out there willing to pressure, and Simon was very willing to just be on his back foot and then hit reactive shots. And he kind of does a bit of what Brett Johns does, where he'll either jump in with a flurry of power punches, or he'll jump in with a double leg, and you don't know which level it's coming at, so you have to pick one or the other, and he can throw you off with that. But Dvalishvili is a pure pressure wrestler. Like all he wants to do at any time is pressure, and it's crazy pressure. He's got a great chin, and he's not the most technical striker or anything like that. But I think he's going to get a lot of the initial advantage of position on Ricky Simon. And I don't like what I saw out of Ricky Simon's gas tank as that Chico Camus fight wore on. Like, I think he tends to, the way he fights and the big bursts he fights with, they don't seem like they manage his gas really well. And I'm not saying he can't bounce back in later rounds and, recover, but I don't see enough of the kind of body work that Frankie Saenz used to hurt Dvalishvili, and I feel like Simon's going to be too willing to get tied up in a scrambling wrestling match where he's giving up too many initial positions to win on the scorecards. So I'm picking Dvalishvili.
First of all, this is a fight that proves, I think it was your point about how like you can watch a bantamweight fight and essentially feel like you're watching a fight in any division.
Mm-hmm.
I watched Ricky Simon, his fight on Dana White's Contender Series. I'm like, oh, this is a flyweight fight. Then I watched Dvalishvili. I'm like, oh, this is a welterweight. It just context alone. There's no build for bantamweight.
Yeah, it's a bantamweight is a weirdo body type division. To be sure.
See, I think I would immediately agree with your scenario if this were more than a 3-round fight, because I am concerned about Dvalishvili's pressure footwork, which doesn't really exist. Like his pressure comes from being attached to you, and he definitely comes forward, but he tends to move sort of slowly forward in straight lines and take his time to reset. And you could make that work if you are doing it constantly and you are capable of absorbing all the punishment along the way, which he typically is. But it might take you a couple rounds of that to start winning the rounds. Even if you are having success strategically over the long term, it might take you a little while before you start actually winning the fight. If you're just walking forward, trying to push these takedowns. I don't know. I guess Simon would have to fight a pretty perfect fight to keep Dvalishvili off of his hips, to keep him from tying up and just use footwork alone. But can he do that in spots enough to, because like the issue is not that Simon doesn't look like he can wrestle competitively with Dvalishvili.
Oh, he easily can.
Yeah. The issue is that he can't do it at Dvalishvili's pace.
But if he can be able to do it at Dvalishvili's pace, and if it's always Dvalishvili who's getting the chance to either put Simon on his heels and force a shot that Dvalishvili can sprawl out, or get in on his hips with Dvalishvili back or with Simon backing up. It's less, can you wrestle with him? Is this guy always going to be getting the first good position that you're working out of? Right.
Sure. Yeah. But that's different if he's sort of mitigating those exchanges. If he's moving enough and picking his shots well enough to keep Dvalishvili from continually staying locked in with him, which is where Merab is really effective.
Yeah.
So, and then Simon, it's not like Simon can't hit some really impressive takedowns of his own if he does get Dvalishvili following him around. I think I'm going to go with Simon here.
Yeah.
I can definitely see your point, but I don't know. I just think the Dvalishvili style might take too much time to really get going.
I do think Simon has a lot more upside as a eventual prospect who's developing a fully fledged game. I think Dvalishvili is kind of he's the kind of fighter that will win fights while people are adjusting to his fighting style. They haven't watched a lot of tape on him. I'm just fighting some dude. I don't really know who it is. And then he'll get 4 or 5 deep into his UFC career, and everybody will just shut him down.
I hope not. I hope not, but you might be right.
That's kind of how I feel about that style that he's got going.
To think if I can think of any other fighters who have followed that path.
Well, I mean, he's not the same athlete, but that was kind of what happened with Steven Seiler, or now happening with Alex Morono. It's just it's something that happens for a lot of guys who come in with one, or even Cody McKenzie. It's what happens for guys who come in with one really crafty part of their game that just is really sort of overwhelming, and people don't understand it or look at it. And then people start to cue in on it and oh wait, this is the only thing this guy's doing.
Yeah. I would like to think that wrestling is the better of any, if you're going to have any area where that's your one thing, it's good to have it in wrestling. But
it is, but it's harder to have it in wrestling when you're the lower weight class.
True.
Skills pay off less.
Should we point out that wrestling might come in handy because Ricky Simon, this is one more thing, just to add to your point, Ricky Simon, not a good control wrestler.
No.
rinse and repeat takedowns all day. People get up easily when he takes them down. So he might end up wasting his own energy and just tying up with Dvalishvili.
Yeah, that's kind of my.
I'm nervous now, but I already made the pick. I have to stick with it.
Ricky Simon is the favorite. Opened at -245, is now at -176, and jumped up to -176. Has basically plateaued there at -167. Dvalishvili opening at +176, adjusting up and down to about +146, and has drifted down a bit to +139. I'm not surprised that Dvalishvili is the underdog here, coming off a loss, and Simon coming in as a very highly touted prospect who hasn't lost in a while. But I expect this to be a razor-thin fight.
Yeah, I think it'll be close, too. Like, I think even if it goes the way I expect, it'll be the kind of fight in which Dvalishvili is clearly working towards controlling it.
Yeah. That brings us to a women's bantamweight bout. Leslie Smith versus Aspen Ladd.
Another solid matchup. Both of these women coming off of TKOs in their last fights. Not something you get to say all that often at women's bantamweight. Adds a little more spice to this, I think. Leslie Smith has, like, we have two obviously very different sides of the veteran prospect spectrum here. Even though, like, Leslie Smith doesn't have the most fights of any fighter, she has fought high-level opposition. She's essentially the Artem Lobov of the women's bantamweight division. She has fought high-level, respectable opposition throughout her career. Won some, lost some, but also, like Artem Lobov, has gotten considerably better, especially in very recent years. She's definitely sort of, you know, like she made a familiar transition, one that a lot of fighters have made, from career-long brawler to pressure fighter. Mm-hmm. And now that she's pressuring people effectively, now that she's cutting off the cage, now that she is keeping her long jab in their faces to set up her other shots, she's pretty damn effective. She's always been able to push a fearsome pace. And it turns out she has more power than we kind of realized as well, because when she's actually got her feet set in front of her opponent, she can crack. She's done some damage in recent fights. And Aspen Ladd is this is a weird matchup because Aspen Ladd is such a more like measured type of fighter, and most of her fights are more measured. And I don't know how.
Also a continue, like, she's also very much set default pressure fighter too.
Yeah, but like what? Essentially, the question that Leslie Smith is going to be asking here is like, at what level do you stop being the effective pressure fighter? Mm-hmm. At what level are you pushed back, and what do you look like when somebody's able to push you back consistently? And I just don't think I've seen enough out of Aspen Ladd. I don't think I've seen her tested enough to think that she's going to be able to back Leslie Smith up when the chips are down. Like, when they start trading shots, I think Smith is going to win out and push Ladd back. And I have a feeling, as with most pressure fighters, that is going to be the beginning of her undoing, that Ladd is going to start to lose composure a bit, start to get looser with her technique. Who knows how it plays out, but I think with pressure fighters, it's often that if you can pressure them, you can get the fight you need. And Leslie Smith, as it happens, is pretty good when she gets a pressure fight. So I'm going to go with Leslie Smith.
Yeah, the thing here is really not for me the stand-up, because I can pretty much, I feel like I can almost guarantee that Leslie Smith is going to win this fight standing.
Can she stop Ladd's takedowns?
Ladd is just a bad striker, honestly. Like, she's
all right. She's
got with rote mechanics. It's kind of a Matt Riddle striking, where it's like,
okay, that's
You know, it like the same punches are coming out no matter what the range is, and no matter, like, it's just sort of like, I'm pressuring and I'm throwing, so that's good, right? Like,
it was only embarrassing for Matt Riddle because he forgot the key ingredient, which is walking forward while doing it.
Yeah. But and she's also really inactive in the clinch. Like, she's just, you know, she's a pressure fighter who moves forward into the clinch, and then she doesn't have an active clinch game at all.
Yeah.
She is, however, a very good wrestler when she remembers to wrestle. And that only seems to happen once every 2 rounds. So I'm going to pick Leslie Smith as well, because I just don't trust Aspen Ladd to remember to wrestle often enough. Like, she was losing easily and clearly to Lena Landsberg before she came out in the second round and just hit a double leg, like actually worked an angle off it, got her down, and then just beat the crap out of Landsberg. And in her fight with Sahara Eubanks, like, she was the better, Eubanks was on the back foot and couldn't punch off her back foot effectively, and Ladd was able to walk her down and land more shots there, but it took like 2.5 rounds for her to finally use the clinch that she was getting repeatedly to turn that into a takedown and get top control on Eubanks. And if she's not going to look for takedowns consistently, she's just going to lose a stand-up battle to Leslie Smith.
Yeah, so. And I mean, the reactive takedown's going to be there if Smith gets to come forward, but the pressure will then be on Ladd to be able to execute a reactive takedown under pressure. So
yeah. I think she can. I don't Leslie Smith's not a great athlete. She gets off balance a lot. She can easily be knocked like over, and then she'll play an aggressive guard game in a way that gives up top control. So that opportunity is going to be really, really clear, but it's on Ladd to prove that she can take it. And I don't think any of the fights Ladd has had to date prove that well enough for me.
Yeah, I agree. And man, nobody in this division puts up striking numbers like Leslie Smith.
No. That's really mostly her what's carrying her career resurgence is that she's willing to just put her head down and throw a ton of volume. And that fight she had with Amanda Lemos lit her up for like 3 minutes solid, just nailed her with shot after shot after shot. And Leslie Smith's like, I'll just throw 5 for every one. And we'll see who lasts longer at this pace.
Smith is definitely one of those fighters who, like, even though I tend to root for her and I like her, I don't really get worried when she starts getting lit up. I'm like, oh, okay. She'll win soon. This is part of it.
Even though, it's very much. It's like what if Justin Gaethje was really not athletic at all?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, pretty much. But that's not a bad thing. I'm here for it.
No, I'm here for it too. Winning on the ragged edge of losing is one of the most fun kind of fights to watch.
True.
Smith is a slight underdog, opened at plus 185, adjusted down to plus 109, and slid slowly up, but mostly plateaued at about plus 123. Aspen Ladd opened at minus 265, jumped up to minus 137, and is currently at minus 149. I get it. Ladd's the hyped prospect, but this is a proving fight for her.
Yeah, Smith seems in a good position to be this division's prospect killer.
Yeah. We've already seen her take out Irene Aldana and Amanda Lemos, who are both very good, solid, prospective fighters. So now that brings us to a light heavyweight bout: Corey Anderson versus Patrick Cummins. And like I watched the tape on Bahadurzada and Chagas first. I was like, this is going to be such a dumb fucking fight, and we'll get to that. And I'm all there for it. Like, this is not dumb in a bad way.
Yeah.
Then I watched the tape on Corey Anderson versus Patrick Cummins. I'm like, oh god.
Now it's dumb in a bad way.
I have to pick Corey Anderson right away. I do. B, there is zero reason Patrick Cummins cannot win this fight. Like, Anderson is a volume striking, control wrestling light heavyweight, and man, does light heavyweight really have no time for those skills. Like, if you don't have power, and if you're not like immediately putting somebody away or submitting somebody on the ground, you are basically just fighting through infinite chances to get knocked out for 15 minutes. And that's exactly what Anderson has shown up in, against Owen St. Preux, where he was winning that fight solidly for 2 rounds before getting lit up at the end of the second and then knocked out in the third. Manawa, who he just tried to wade in on with volume. And even going back to losing a decision to Mauricio Hua, where it's like, oh yeah, you're slowly outworking Shogun and then getting cracked with one huge shot in every round and losing that round.
Yeah, and it's tricky. Like, it's definitely a stylistic thing because, like, you can probably say Corey Anderson's chin isn't as good as other light heavyweights, but it's hard to even say, based on his now 3 knockouts, that it's bad.
Yeah, no, I mean, they're deep into fights.
Ferociously clean punches by, light heavyweights, which is a division full of guys who literally just try to throw power punches.
Yeah, and Patrick Cummins' chin is bad.
but he's able to fight through it if you can't put him away, and Corey Anderson is not a power hitter. Yep.
And he's a good wrestler. He's a good enough wrestler to keep scrambling with Corey Anderson's control takedown style. Because Cummins is not a control takedown wrestler. Like, that's his big knock, is that he's not going to control you on the ground. He's going to try to hurt you and let you back up and let you back into the fight. And that's a big reason I'm picking Anderson, is just because Cummins isn't going to assert top control, and he's going to be there to be very hittable and hurtable. But all through that fight, like, Anderson will let him hang for every minute of it. So this is going to be it'll be fun, but it'll be really dumb. So I'm picking Corey Anderson, and it'll just be interesting to see how Patrick Cummins deals with each minute of adversity.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to say that I still think of Corey Anderson like he's not just I don't like to think of him as just another light heavyweight, because he's still young, he's still talented, and now he's getting into these Ryan Bader waters so early into his career, which it's like unavoidable because there's only like 35 dudes in this division, and like most of them have already lost to Shogun. So like it's like flyweight essentially. You just get thrown into the Shark Tank, and even if it's not the craziest Shark Tank in the world because everyone's old, it is, like these are guys who focus everything on power punching, who have been in a million fights before, who have way more experience than you. If you're Corey Anderson, it's extremely difficult to figure out how to make your style work under these circumstances. And that has to be considered in matchups. Like, how is his mental game changing or being changed by the fact that he just keeps running into this wall, when it still seems like, looking at him in a vacuum, like he could run through a few professional opponents and probably win some of these matchups. He looks like with
him and what's the Canadian Lithuanian
Misha Serkinov.
Yeah, he and Serkinov both. It's like watching these guys who are very good athletes with very specifically deep skill sets go up against the old broken down war horses at light heavyweight and just get shut down over and over, and you're like, what the hell?
But it's like I still have the feeling like Corey Anderson could beat Shogun Hua.
Yeah.
Give him like a couple wins and let his skills come along a bit more. He could beat Shogun Hua. It's just like he fought him like really early in his career. He fought John Volante in his first UFC fight.
Yeah.
So and Patrick Cummins fought fucking Daniel Cormier in his first UFC fight. He's just a different kind of fighter than Anderson. So I don't know. I don't know where Corey Anderson's at. I don't know where he's headed anymore, how he feels about his career. That all of that could be pertinent against a guy like Patrick Cummins, who, like, if you allow yourself to get drawn into a kind of a war with him, he can win that kind of fight. He's very gritty. He throws at a very high pace. He's not a control wrestler, but he's a type of fighter who can get away with being not a control wrestler because he can keep pushing and chasing takedowns over and over and over again.
Got a very good technical takedown game. Yeah. It's just that once he gets you to the ground, you're probably going to get up. Even if you eat some hard shots to do it.
You can tell what his style was as a collegiate wrestler. Like he wasn't like taking backs and looking for pins.
No.
Corey Anderson does, though. Like, how does he I think he'll still be able to contend with the wrestling of Patrick Cummins, because Corey Anderson's game looks a lot more like it was designed by the same guy who trained Frankie Edgar.
Yeah.
Like, takedown, half guard, secure, chip away, make the guy hurt. He's probably going to cut Patrick Cummins up on the ground, and he does get him down. He's going to be in position to transition to the back or attack a submission when Cummins scrambles in a purely wrestling way. And, on the feet, like, Patrick Cummins is going to have to put a lot of pressure on Corey Anderson to have the same effect he has against other opponents. And I just don't think Patrick Cummins is that good of a pressure fighter. Like for him, it's either he's getting lit up and trading, or he is chasing you and like completely smothering himself or missing wide. Like when he came out trying to pressure Daniel Cormier, he was just a nutcase. And I don't think he's really progressed beyond that. So I think, I'll go with Corey Anderson too, but
it's going to be a dumb fight.
It's going to be a dumb fight. And if Corey Anderson loses instantly, it will not be a surprise. It'll make me sad. I know it could have been different, but it won't surprise me.
Anderson is the favorite, open at plus 140, adjusted down to plus 110, and drifting continually down, dropping just in the past couple days to minus 128. Patrick Cummins opening at minus 170, adjusting up to minus 137, and drifting upward, and then the past couple days jumping up to plus 104 now. So I like the odd shift, frankly. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. Light heavyweight, like heavyweight, should be within a certain metric all the time.
Yep. Flyweight or welterweight bout next. Siyar Bahadurzada versus Luan Chagas, and take it away.
You've already got our mouths watering for this one, Zane, teasing it earlier. The dumbest fight on the card. Somehow, despite Corey Anderson and Patrick Cummins both being on the same card. Siyar Bahadurzada is now like a mythical creature who just returns once every couple of years to kill a man in a cage and then vanishes into the wilderness. Vanishes to wander the steppes of his native Afghanistan. And Luan Chagas is like a really janky brawler. And it's going to be fun. Bahadurzada is a fairly technical, sometimes I would describe him as shockingly technical, because you see some of his fights and it's like, this is a brawler.
I think he's a ridiculously talented athlete in very specific ways and with a very few techniques, and everything else is like clearly when he fights, it's all just done by feel and like a couple techniques, and if he has to reach outside those techniques, things get sloppy in a hurry, but he's also a really good athlete that just kind of makes up for it. One of those dudes who doesn't look like a good athlete, and he probably couldn't, like, if you put him in like a foot race, he would probably like lose to any reasonably fast person, but is also just like ridiculously quick with little movements, and
he's just made for fighting, man. Like he's strong, he's super durable, he's got power in both hands. He's just like built for fighting. And is very, very comfortable fighting. Like he's been in so many wild wars. I think that's where, even though we've seen him be like a one shot at a time power puncher, that's why he appears technical in more recent fights. Like he's had so much experience that he can just work a 1-2, work a counter left hook, just figure out the same openings in different ways over and over and over, rinse and repeat. He'll make it work. He's still probably going to get taken down by Luan Chagas. Like Bahadurzada is still a very, very one-note fighter. That can get lost when nowadays you end up talking about a lot of matchups as striking matchups, but that's because like usually both of the guys can stop the other guy's takedowns. And, you know, Bahadurzada's takedown defense is okay. I think it's actually improved a bit in recent fights, but it's not really been tested by any effective wrestlers. And Chagas is a surprisingly good takedown artist. Chagas is also a good athlete. He's got great dexterity, shocking power. Like looking at him, you would not expect him to hit as hard as he does, but he's one of those dudes who kind of hurts people on accident as well. And then has a more varied game. Bahadurzada can kick. He is ostensibly a Muay Thai stylist, but he really likes to sling that right hand and set it up with the jab. Chagas has heavy hands, but is a very versatile kicker. He likes his side kicks. He likes his spinning attacks. He likes round kicks to every target, can throw them off both legs quite well. He does do that out of a pretty square stance, which means that Bahadurzada could light him up, but I'm kind of feeling Chagas here. I think he has the options. I think the wrestling is going to be big, just being able to hit takedowns, even if he just has to make Bahadurzada work. A big thing with a guy like Bahadurzada is taking him out of his comfort zone. And Chagas almost managed to do that when he fought Sergio Moraes back in the day. I think he has progressed since then. And I think Bahadurzada is a more forgiving stylistic matchup for him than Moraes ever was. So I'm going to go with Chagas.
I got to pick Bardasada on this one.
All right.
I
a lot of dissent on this card. That's a good sign.
It is. I think that Chagas' game, just like the basics of his striking, don't like they just lead him into exactly the fight Bahadurzada wants.
Yeah.
And Chagas can mix things up with some good takedowns, but Bahadurzada is good at getting up, and Chagas is control because he tends to be kind of an aggressive sub hunter.
Yeah.
His control is not great. You know, he is the kind of grappler where you look back at his record and you see, like, you know, a bunch of arm bars and triangle chokes, along with some rear naked chokes and things like that, but the kind of submissions that you only get when you're really aggressively sub hunting. And as he's gone up in higher levels, that kind of offense tends to get harder to make work. And Bahadurzada doesn't get stopped very often in any sense.
Yeah.
He's been subbed a couple times, but it's been a decade now. And so I kind of feel like Bahadurzada is going to get chances to get back up and work his striking game again. And then Chagas, he comes forward with a lot of variety, but he tends to run forward with his head up, throwing power. And Bahadurzada's his whole striking game is just all about timing people who give him big openings. And I think that's like, it's just exactly the right kind of style for Chagas to just leap in to a counter hook.
I think it'll definitely be a bit of an IQ test for Chagas.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a good feeling because like he's 24.
Yeah.
And already he has made, I think, visible improvements since his UFC debut.
Oh,
he
yeah.
looks to be athletic, so we'll see if he can, like, the question is, can he solve the like three things that Siyar Bahadurzada does quite well?
Yeah. And I'm kind of feeling like no, just from the way he's willing to square up and move forward, throwing power with his head up and online, it just gives me really bad feelings, even if Bahadurzada's hittable and inconsistent with his amount of strikes he throws and not very technically deep anywhere else. It just he's made a whole career out of hitting harder than people in exactly those situations.
Yep.
All right. Odds on that fight, close to dead even. Bahadurzada opened at -180, adjusted up and down to -109, currently at -108. Chagas opened at +140, adjusted up and down to -111, currently at -115. So I'm okay with that. I think Chagas has a much better, more well-rounded, nuanced, or not even nuanced, but just more well-rounded, diverse game to attack with. And Bahadurzada has the better single answer, you know?
No, for every single one of these on which we have dissented, I've been like, oh, I can see exactly where you're coming from. It's a very good sign. I think these are really well-matched fights.
Yeah, like I said, I don't think there's any bad fights on this card, really. Even if there's some really dumb ones, you know?
Oh, yeah. But in the best way. Usually.
But in the best way. It brings us to a flyweight bout, Magomed Bibulatov versus Ulka Sasaki. And this is, I don't know, this is a good fight because Bibulatov, you know, he kind of had the rails go off against John Moraga. He's always been a fighter who, you know, he's a really impressive, crushing grappler and wrestler. And his striking's always just been sort of like
flash
and no substance, but he's willing to throw and just be daring and get himself in positions that would be troubling, but he's always been the better athlete who could bail himself out of trouble with his wrestling and grappling game. Then John Moraga just put one on him. And there's always a chance that when your striking is built that way, almost any fighter could potentially just crack you. Any fighter who's reasonably a decent striker, and Sasaki is. You know, Sasaki's got he can actually throw some decent punches with some heat. Works nice, tight boxing game in situations. Problem for Sasaki is that he's never really able to sustain control of a fight anywhere. And when things get a little bit defensively bad for him standing, they tend to just blow apart everywhere else. I mean, even in the Justin Scoggins fight where he ended up winning, he was getting lit the fuck up in that fight, and it was leading to him getting put on his back and controlled on the ground too. You know, it was not like, oh, he's just getting hurt and then Scoggins is going to the ground, Sasaki's just immediately owning him there. It was like, no, he's getting hurt and he's going down and he's getting beat up in positions and then he's reversing and eventually being able to scramble through. But Babulatov doesn't tend to make those kind of mistakes on the ground that Scoggins has become notorious for. So I have to trust that Babulatov, Sasaki's never knocked anyone out, or hasn't since 2014 against Hong Jung-yi, rather. He's got a couple knockouts, 2 in his career. But he doesn't knock people out, and without that, I don't trust him to be able to keep control of this fight well enough to keep Babulatov from getting into the kind of scrambles and the kind of top control that he wants.
Yeah.
That's going to let him control the rest of the fight. So I got to take Babulatov by decision.
Yeah, if Babulatov were to give Ulka Sasaki the particular kind of striking match that he wants, Sasaki's skills are good enough to get a win there for sure. Mm-hmm. He's got long arms, and he is learning with each passing fight to use them more effectively. Nice jab, good counter left that he likes to throw. He's also, I think, like becoming a little more adept at fighting out of both stances.
Mm-hmm.
It still frustrates me that MMA fighters always jump to that before they have actually like perfected the first stance. But you know, he's got some moves from both. When you have long arms, you can get away with that kind of stuff. But you know, like why would Bibulatov do that? He has no reason to stand at range and remain more or less in front of Sasaki. And I think you framed it perfectly. Sasaki, he cannot control a fight anywhere. He has a particularly like Japanese stylistic issue where it's just like, you give me a fight, I will fight you in it.
Yeah.
What you have to respect, of course, he's extremely game, and like in the Scoggins fight, he can get lit up and he can get hurt, and he will continue to keep pressing for any advantage he can, just never really in the smartest way possible. Yeah. Never really like, okay, maybe I should change how this fight is playing out to improve my chances. And Bibulatov can do that. I mean, more than anything, I guess control in MMA always comes down to wrestling. And Bibulatov can decide where the fight takes place because he's just a better wrestler than Sasaki, who just he really can't stop a takedown that well. And Sasaki's very dangerous on the ground. Like, if Bibulatov has a sort of brain fart on the floor, like he did on the feet against Moraga, Sasaki's definitely the kind of fighter who can still sneak in that rear naked choke and surprise him. But, you know, if this is a getting back on track kind of performance from Bibulatov, then he seems to have all the tools to get the fight he needs.
Yeah. Odds on it, Sasaki is a heavy underdog, opened at plus 220, adjusted up and down to plus 279, currently out at plus 292. Babulatov opened at minus 300, adjusted up and down to about minus 340, and is slid out to minus 372. That's a bit long for me, mostly because Babulatov's not a great finisher.
Yeah.
And so he's going to let Sasaki hang around with him all fight while Sasaki's looking for ways to finish. So,
yeah, it's a little long. I don't mind it being kind of wide, like because I stylistically this does seem like a good fight for Bibulatov, but
we've also seen
to
UFC or in his in the Lausa fight too. He's very willing to spend extended amounts of time working on his striking and just trying to do a bunch of flashy shit that it doesn't work that well.
Yeah. So, yeah, that seems a little long.
Brings us to a welterweight bout. Ryan LaFlare, Alex Garcia. And, take it away.
Man, who is Alex Garcia?
Why? He's a left hook and a takedown.
Yeah.
And a double leg.
Yeah. He's kind of looked okay lately.
Yeah.
He's looked like Garcia is one of those fighters. It's very difficult for me to wrap my head around because there's like such a clear direction in which it seems like he needs to go, or there's like a clear hurdle that he's struggling with time and time again, and it just takes him way longer than you expect to just get one leg over that hurdle. And I think he's got one leg over it now. Like, he's a 3-round fighter now, much more so than he ever has been before. And that was like the big problem for him before, is that he just would lose control and gas. And it always looked like, yes, he's a very muscular guy. Yes, he relies on his power, but it always looked like he could have avoided it and just never did. He would always just start swinging. He'd feel the pressure, whether it was pressure he was putting on himself or pressure from the opponent, and break down. And he's past that.
Well, for a fight, at least. Yeah. I mean, he still lost to Tim Means, but
yeah, he's past it in a way that, like, Rose Namajunas beating Paige Van Zandt was past her mental issues. It's a step. It's a considerable step.
It is.
And he's taken on Ryan LaFlare here, who, how long has it been now since LaFlare competed last?
He got knocked out by Alex Oliveira in July of last year.
Okay. So, like
8 months.
Yeah, and LaFlare is now 34 years old. He has never been a stupendous athlete in the way that Garcia is. He's never like struck you as a very strong fighter, as a particularly fast fighter. He's going to have to chase a really particular kind of fight here, I think, to beat Alex Garcia. Like, Garcia, thing is, I don't think I've seen Garcia be forced to be a defensive wrestler that much in his MMA career. Not many people have gone in there and just tried to tie up with him and force him into chain takedown defenses.
Sean Strickland did.
A bit, yeah. But it was also like, it's hard to gauge because it feels like it was a slightly different Garcia. Like, if he was actually past the gassing and being a maniac point of his career, then how does he respond differently to that approach, but from a better wrestler? I don't know. Ryan LaFlare looked kind of frail to me against Oliveira. That was the impression I got. Is like, it really struck me that he was not as athletic as his opponent in that fight. That it just didn't hurt the other guy when he hit him, and then when LaFlare got hit, it was like, holy shit. I don't know. I have a feeling that Garcia is just going to be stout and willing to throw combinations whenever LaFlare tries to get in on him. And Garcia is not a bad grappler.
Yeah, no.
He can probably hang in the scrambles. The problem with LaFlare is like he is too willing to give up position and allow a scramble when he sees a submission, but not particularly dangerous with his submissions.
No,
he chases a lot of them.
He's only finished 2 and they were arm bars.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, he very rarely actually secures one. So, like, even if he does get taken down, it does feel like Garcia, as long as he stays calm, can probably still win just given another round. So, yeah, I'm going with Garcia here.
Yeah, I got to say the frailty is a big thing to me, especially with, like, going and watching some of Garcia's recent fights, Tim Means, and actually going back to Sean Strickland 1-2, where Sean Strickland does strike me as a very similar styled matchup as the Ryan LaFlare fight, like just a very similar style of fighter. In a lot of ways, Strickland doesn't chase the takedown nearly as well as LaFlare does, but has a similar kind of boxing style of like jumping in and out and looking for single long punches. And Garcia actually, like, there are a few moments early in that fight where when he needed to chase Strickland down just with left hands, he was able to catch Strickland hard moving back in a very similar way as LaFlare moves away.
Yeah.
He was able to cover that distance fast enough with his strikes to get there. So that definitely has me concerned. The other thing is that, yeah, he's generally, I mean, even in the Strickland fight, been good at scrambling out of bad positions, even when he gets into them. Like, he can be taken down, but he'll fight really hard off of his back to get back up.
Yeah.
And LaFlare can lose those kinds of positions, and also is just not a good finisher. So it's really on LaFlare to control Garcia for every round while eating the harder shots.
Yeah. I mean, if LaFlare can make Garcia get back to his feet over and over and over and over again,
yeah, he'll probably tire him out.
He could take him back to where he was before his last fight. But
yeah. It is also worth noting, though, the Alex Oliveira fight that's first KO loss in LaFlare's career. So do you just measure that as like, oh, because part of what happened in that fight too, watching it is, like I say, LaFlare is a pretty responsible defensive fighter. Like, he moves away from things. He's a very in and out. Like, come in, throw a couple of shots, and get way out so that I'm nowhere near to be hit. And Oliveira was able to catch him off guard with, some wilder strikes that are a little, his sort of weirdness that Alex Oliveira has on the feet. And Garcia doesn't really have that. Garcia is very, set, I'm going to leap in and throw a left hook. And that's really all I'm going to do. So, it could be that LaFlare is able to measure him for that and stay away from it and just get in on his hips and do all the things that he needs to do to keep this fight controlled. But I don't know. Mostly maybe because I just don't want to see it. I'm not going to bet on it.
Yeah. I pick fights like that way more often than I'd like to admit.
Yeah.
This is how I want it to go.
So I would like to see Garcia be able to chase LaFlare when he's backing up, because LaFlare is not particularly dangerous on his back foot. Tends to just try to get way out and reset.
I mean, he can definitely do that in spots.
What?
Garcia can definitely do that in spots.
Yeah.
At the very least.
Yeah. And if he puts it on, if he can put some power on him, I think he can change. I think he can make this fight his. And we'll see, though. It's a tough one to call. LaFlare is the favorite at the moment, opening at -195, adjusting up to -136, and drifting slowly back down to -155. Garcia opened at +155, adjusting down to +119, and climbing slowly back up to +129. So, I'm not, I guess I'm not shocked that LaFlare is the favorite, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
this feels like LaFlare getting knocked out again to me.
If you were to just look at their records and look at them as their careers in the aggregate, it definitely makes sense that LaFlare would be the favorite.
Yeah, exactly.
He's been the fighter performing at a higher level. He's proven it more. But you're right. It just feels like, I don't know. Something's happening with him, and the opposite is kind of happening with Garcia.
That brings us then to the first fight on the main card, Jim Miller versus Dan Hooker. And Jim Miller should win this fight and probably won't. I really still do not like the way Dan Hooker fights. I know he's one of those guys that you're like,
I don't know how I feel about his new style. He's growing into it, but
yeah,
he betrayed me after that Maximo Blanco fight. I was like, this is what we're gonna get, and then he just couldn't make that work.
Yeah,
so now he's like a bizarre outfighter.
He's got the weirdest game because he's an outfighter with no punches.
I don't know if that's fair. He's got an okay jab. He's got
an okay jab. That is the end of it, though.
That's the punch, Zane. Come on. That's important.
You watch his fights with Pearson and with Diakise, and he's out at range, and he's like feinting, and he's throwing these snapping front kicks, and he's feinting, and he's throwing these snapping front kicks, and he's feinting, and you're like, oh, when's that big punch coming? He's got that right hand chambered, and he's feinting, and he's throwing the snapping front kick, and he just keeps walking forward. And even his opponents are like, oh, I got to watch out. I can't. Or, they're walking him down. Even they're like, I got to watch out because it's tried. He's not walking forward. He's on his back foot usually. Or as often as not. Either way.
Now, yeah, it's difficult to just summarize the game because it's changed so dramatically and it still is as weird as it was before.
Either going forward like he was against Diakise or backward as he was against Pearson. His opponents are waiting, and they're really respecting this potential power that's about to come at them.
Yeah.
And then you see him finally commit to going forward, and it's almost always with his hands to jump back into the clinch like he tried to do with Blanco, where he almost always just gets pushed back outside. Like, he's not strong enough physically to be the kind of clinch fighter he wants to be. He is, however, becoming very adept at finding creative single strikes off of his back foot or going forward, that because his opponents are so worried about what he's going to do and worried about all the feints he's throwing, they just don't see coming. Whatever it, whether it's the counter knee against Ross Pearson to knock him out, or then just getting in on a wrestling game against Mark Diakese and eventually turning that into a submission. There's like, it's very much like what we saw out of Brad Tavares and Alejandro Perez in an earlier stage, where it's like you're basically staying really defensive and you're shutting down a lot of your opponent's offense. And that's going to lead to some wins. And it's just going to lead you there because you're going to stay safe and look for openings. And your opponent is going to get really frustrated and make mistakes.
Yeah. I mean, he's on that same career trajectory. Cause like, you remember how weird it was when he first did this against Yair Rodriguez?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, what is Dan Hooker doing? I thought he was going to walk Rodriguez down and put pressure on him and try to get to the clinch, and he was doing this bizarre outfighting thing. It's just that he's gotten comfortable with it.
Yeah,
the style is similarly patchy and bizarre as it was then. It's just like now he's cool with it.
Yeah, like he was losing to Ross Pearson up until he knocked him out with a knee. And
he just gets creative with these really tricky counters. And
the Diakese fight, like I was rewatching that, I'm just like, there's nothing fucking happening in this fight. Because he's just walking backwards and throwing random jumping, spinning wheel kicks. And Hooker is just walking forwards and feinting and then getting to the clinch and getting pushed back outside to throw snapping front kicks and feint again. And the thing is that he's really fucking durable. He's never been finished. And Jim Miller looks more and more like a guy who can get worn out and beat up doing his own game. Like Jim Miller doing Jim Miller things looks more like a fighter who kind of puts himself in danger fighting the Jim Miller fight.
Yeah.
And I can't see... I think Miller will win this for a while, but I think sooner or later Hooker's going to catch him with something. He's still really durable, Jim Miller. Like, despite that, he got knocked out by Don Cerrone. He had that terrible-looking couple of fights against... where the fight against Chiesa and the fight against Diego Sanchez, where he just looked god-awful. But I think... And it was like, he had Lyme disease, and he cured that. But I think then, like, the stretch of opponents he had right after that kind of disguised the fact that he was still slowing down. I was like, the really bad Lyme disease recovery, and then 3 opponents who are more shot than him disguised the fact that the trend is still going downward.
Yeah.
And then he also... Dustin Poirier, who beats him on a busted leg, and Anthony Pettis, who gets one of the only wins he's had in the past 5 years, and Francisco Trinaldo, who just broke him down and wore him out over that fight.
Yeah, he's definitely there was a marked improvement in his performances after he found out that he had Lyme disease.
Yeah,
but I think it's also a situation. If I recall correctly, it's a situation where in order to actually cure it, he would have to retire. Like it had to get it out of his system or whatever. He would have to stop exerting himself. Like the exertion of training and fighting is part of what makes it impossible to get rid of the virus. So he does still have Lyme disease until he's done fighting, basically. As far as I understand it. So yeah, like that's still affecting him. It's just something, it's like now he knows what it is. He can deal with it, which is obviously better than being ignorant and just suffering in ignorance, but it's still a problem. And that combines with the fact that Jim Miller, while he is definitely the kind of fighter who gets technically better as his career goes on, he's a smart fighter who just loves like crossing T's and dotting I's. He likes to make sure that all of his techniques are tight and well practiced, and he looks like an experienced, well schooled competitor. But like he's never been an astounding next level athlete, and he's already having a physical decline because he's, aside from Lyme disease, he's 34 and has had a very long and very arduous career. So at some point, the other shoe has to drop for a guy like Jim Miller. Is Dan Hooker that other shoe? Yeah, I mean, like, the real thing here is that, like, the reason Anthony Pettis beat Jim Miller is, like, Jim Miller couldn't pressure Anthony Pettis.
Yeah.
And that was a real problem. Like, Jim Miller needed more than anything to pressure Anthony Pettis in that fight. He needed to walk him down as often as possible. He needed, if he could, to put Pettis against the fence. He needed to follow the blueprint that everyone else who's beaten Pettis, other than Edson Barboza, has followed. And he could have done it, but it just, he didn't execute. Like, Pettis pressured him, and then Jim just kind of had an even striking battle with him. He was still in the fight the whole time, still landed some good shots, but he was fighting Anthony Pettis' fight. And if he doesn't, the question here is he fighting Dan Hooker's fight if he pressures him, or if he doesn't? If he walks after Dan Hooker,
I mean, either way, you can take rounds off Dan Hooker.
True. So it's better to pressure him, because at the very least, Hooker is not going to be throwing his kicks. He's not going to be as busy off the back foot. Whereas Miller, with his kicks, he's a very good kicker, can actually do some damage as Hooker's trying to evade him on the outside. But I just don't have confidence that he'll do it. That's the only problem. Like, if Jim Miller comes out here and starts pressuring from the opening bell, I'll be like, okay, he's going to win this fight. But if he doesn't, he is going to end up on the end of Dan Hooker's reach a lot. He's going to end up in that dangerous zone where Hooker's creativity and precision becomes a real issue, where he can catch you with those knees, catch you with that one clean punch or whatever.
Part of the problem, too, is that Miller, his entries from distance, when he's pressuring, his pressuring entries are really predictable.
Yeah.
So when he's moving forward, it tends to be like, okay, I'm jumping in hard 1-2, jumping in hard 1-2, jumping in hard 1-2, and he can easily be countered. And then when he's on the back foot, he's just not defensively responsible at all. So he gets hit hard when you're pressuring him.
Yeah. So, God, it feels weird to pick Dan Hooker over Jim Miller.
I know, it does.
But it just kind of feels like, Jim's just never been good at doing the particular things he would probably need to do to beat Dan Hooker, and he's no longer the athlete he was when he was younger. He's no longer as vivacious as he used to be, so it's going to be even harder for him to get around this tough style matchup. So, but if Dan Hooker might get so little done fighting this kind of fight, Miller might still win it.
Yeah, he might.
We'll see.
Miller's still hard to finish, so if it goes to a decision, Hooker just may have thrown 5 strikes in each round and lost. So,
and every once in a while, Miller really surprises you with his wrestling. Every once in a while, it's like, oh shit, a double leg.
Yeah. No, he's got it. The problem, the thing that made me concerned is that against Francisco Trinaldo, he really got that going, and he seemed exhausted after doing that for a round.
Yep. Same here. I noticed that ever since we found out about the Lyme disease thing. Anytime I see Jim Miller get unexpectedly exhausted, I'm like, oh no, what's happening? Because that never used to be an issue for him, really.
That said, Hooker is a wide favorite. Opened at -270, adjusted down to -337, currently up to -354. Jim Miller opened at +190, adjusted up to +280, currently at +277.
I mean, come on. It's a little wide, right?
Yeah, it's a little wide for a fighter in Dan Hooker, where I still watch him every round. And I'm like, oh, I hate what you're doing. Or just, I hate. Oh, who was the other fighter that's fought recently where I just keep thinking that? And I mean, it's kind of like if Brian Ortega didn't have one really outstanding thing he was good at.
Yeah, if Brian Ortega wasn't submissions Derek Lewis.
Yeah.
Who else was it? Who else was it? They don't.
I can't remember now. It was somebody else who was just like, I hate the way you fight for rounds, but it works. I don't remember. Maybe it's John Moraga, but you know.
How dare you? John Moraga looked fucking ace against Wilson Hayes, by the way.
He did. No, he made it work. But anyway, whatever. Brings us to our next bout. Aljamain Sterling, Brett Johns, take it away.
Yes, one of the better fights on a card full of good matchups. Not necessarily like style. This is one of the more enticing fights. Be a lot of questions answered here for Aljamain Sterling, who Pat Wyman and I agreed on heavy hands this week is definitely reaching that point in his career where it is time to shit or get off the pot. So
yeah, he's 28. He's been doing this for 7 years now. He is a fighter in his prime. These are the prime years where you are supposed to be the best you're going to be. And it either happens and works now or it doesn't.
Yeah, and we're no longer looking at a fighter who is like a developing talent. And the problem is there's still a lot of development that needs to be done with Aljamain Sterling.
Yeah.
And he's past the stage where he should be focusing most of his energies on developing his skill set. It's definitely come along. Sterling's just had such a weird career where like he was a more comfortable striker before coming to the UFC, and then he became this really weird, picky, ineffectual striker, and then he became like that combined with his really effective ground game. Now he's boxing again, and looks pretty good doing it. But it took him so long to get back to the point where he's like training his hands, training his footwork, training his defense, all of these as things that should be essentials. It took him so long to get back to this point that like there's still a lot of gaps in what he does. The way he throws his punches, how he moves his head, he's not reading everything with just perfect ease.
Over time, I've developed a lot more questions about Serra Longo as a fight team than I've developed answers.
Same.
You know, where it's been like, oh my God, look at what they did to Chris Weidman. And then I see the other fighters that come out of there and I'm like, why is your game this weird? Dvalishvili, and I'm like, all you fucking do is wrestle. Like, that's it. Where is the rest of your game?
Yeah, they have so many fighters like that where it's like, what is your team good at?
Yeah.
But they're all
the
like
thing is that
fighters.
Yeah. It's such a small camp too. So like it's all friends of friends and people train like a tight knit thing where I'm like, I don't even know what a Serra Longo fighter looks like.
Right.
At this point, you know? Like, you know, even with something like SBG Ireland, I may not like the way they train their fighters. I may not like what any SBG fighter looks like other than Conor McGregor, but they all look the same.
You can see Owen Roddy's fingerprints on lots of their fight. Yeah, I honestly, I've had the same thought myself many times in the past few weeks, just watching footage of Serra Longo fighters being like, what's the focus of his team? Like, what are you pushing towards? Yeah, Aljamain Sterling's game definitely is indicative of that. It's like he's clearly very, very good at one particular thing and is okay at several other things, but it's like there's this weird nebulous there's no process to it. There's no way to clearly.
It's not like Team Alpha Male where you're like, oh, okay, you rinse, repeat takedowns, look immediately for submissions, get back up, and then you're looking for power punches on top that can set you up into those takedown transitions. Or, you know, under Dwayne Ludwig, you're developing a more footwork-based, like, tricky power boxing game. But it's always been, like, power punching into takedowns, look for instant subs, rinse, repeat, back up. Look to land hard shots in transition as they get back up.
And it's nothing like that with Aljo. And the weird thing is, like, Aljamain Sterling is obviously the superior athlete of these two, but Brett Johns has every aspect in his game that Sterling lacks in his. Like, it is very consistent, predictable in the best possible way, where you know what you're going to get out of Brett Johns
is doing.
Yeah, you know what you're going to get, but you still have a hard time stopping it. Because he's very good at pushing the pace, throwing straight punches down the pipe, maintaining a certain distance, shockingly good at just constantly keeping pressure on without having to be trading shots, and then especially getting you to the fence working you into a clinch position or a single leg or whatever, ripping you down to the ground. And he's just relentless on the floor. And so we have this really interesting style clash where it's like, what happens when Brett Johns takes Aljamain Sterling down? You know, like what happens? Aljamain Sterling, can Brett Johns use his pace the way Brian Caraway's pace affected Aljamain Sterling?
Yeah.
Is Aljamain Sterling a good enough mover, pot shotter at this point to keep Brett Johns from closing him down consistently? If he does that effectively, will it lead to a type of fight that he can win? You know, like, because even if he's keeping Johns from tying him up, Sterling's still going to have to hit a takedown of his own to have a really reliable look at winning this thing. So, like, this feels like it could go any way at almost any moment, and it's more so because it's a big question answering kind of fight. It's like, as I said, like this is determining what kind of fighter almost Aljamain Sterling's gonna be, and likewise for Brett Johns, this is like an opportunity for a prospect to become a contender with a win here. I am going to go with Brett Johns. I still like the game of Aljamain Sterling, but it is just too weird for me. And viewers will know we both like process, Zane, but I really, really like process. I like when I can understand what's happening. I really get a particular pleasure out of watching a fighter and saying, like, I know why he did that at almost every moment in the fight and just getting it. And I get it when Brett Johns is fighting, and I still don't really get it with Aljamain Sterling. So,
yeah, for me, I'm going to pick Aljamain Sterling just because this is a truth-telling moment for Brett Johns that I need to see before I can just feel like I think his game works at a high level. Because his game, like, it is really well constructed. It is coming in on straight lines, and he's either throwing a flurry of power hooks, short power hooks, or he's coming in with a double leg. And it's you either have to have your hands up to protect your head and leave your hips open, or you have to have you have your hands down to stop the shot, and he just comes in with a series of power shots. The thing is that his wrestling game, that particular part of his wrestling game, has looked a lot less effective in the UFC. So far, and he's had to rely a lot more on a clinch against the fence, chain takedown, craftier wrestling game. Like his shot isn't explosive enough. Where in the UFC, people can have their hands up, and he'll get in on their hips, and they can still stop his shot. And so the question for here is, what if he just can't wrestle at all in this?
Yeah, good point.
And if he can't, is he actually a competent kickboxer over time, over rounds? Because he comes in with his head up online, throwing multiple punches in ways like, it's more fluid and technical than what Chase Sherman's doing, but there's a bantamweight Chase Sherman-ness about it, you know?
Yeah, that's fair. I think Brett Johns, like, it's clear he has a feel for what's going on. I still remember his UFC debut against Kwan Ho Kwok. Like, Kwok is an athletic and technical striker, and Johns hit him with some hard shots.
Yeah.
And continually found ways to sneak those shots in. He's got a game that, like, doesn't look like it's correct, but he does have a feel for how striking works.
And I think over time, over rounds too, he tends to get a little better feel of how, like, defensively, how to move. Like, it'll take a round and a half, but he'll start to slip things a little more and counter and, like, rip with his hands a little better. But I also don't necessarily think that Brett Johns' takedown defense is that great, mostly because I think he has a lot of confidence in his ability to be a flowy grappler from anywhere. Aljamain Sterling has a little bit of that problem, but for Sterling, his problem is more once he's on the bottom, he's not very effective at getting back up because he thinks that he can grapple off his back. But he'll stuff the shot. But if you can get him down, if you can pull him to the mat, if you can catch him off guard, you can keep him down. But if Aljamain Sterling gets on top, I really honestly think he can do a lot of bad things to Brett Johns. Like, I have a lot more faith in Sterling's top game being functional to punish Brett Johns than I do Brett Johns' top game being functional to punish Aljamain Sterling.
It's fair.
So I think that Sterling, I think this is the test where I need to see Brett Johns be able to use his wrestling here in the ways that Brian Caraway was able to, before I just trust that he can. Because beating Kwanho Kwok and Albert Morales and getting a calf slicer on Joe Soto is just not the same.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I'm picking Aljamain Sterling, and I'm picking him to be able to to use his wrestling to keep this fight controlled. But it'll be an interesting test, It'll be an interesting fight. Odds on the bout, close to dead even. Johns opened at -150, adjusted up and down to like -135, and he trended upwards to -106 and has stayed even there now at -107. Aljamain Sterling opened at +110, adjusted up and down a bunch to +111, and fell down to -117 and is currently at -116. So I don't mind it being even, but I think Sterling deserves a little more credit on. I think he deserves to be a bit more of a favorite. He's proven himself at a higher level for winning higher level fights than what Johns has been able to do in the cage so far.
Hard not to understand it though, considering what happens to Aljo in his last fight.
Yeah, that knockout he came off of against Marlon Moraes was brutal. It's just not something I think Johns is capable of reproducing.
No doubt. Yeah.
Mostly the big fear here, I think the big question for me to answer with Johns against Sterling is, can Johns keep his hands put together in combinations, long combinations, rushing forward? Because Aljamain Sterling, kind of like other fighters, like Ryan LaFlare and some other fighters here, he's really bad at defending combinations while moving backwards. Like he can get out of the way of one or two strikes, but that's really what Marlon Moraes did. That was a huge problem for Sterling immediately and led to him finishing the fight. Is he'd chase Sterling down with 4 or 5 shots, and
because Sterling's improvement in head movement in the recent fights was literally just that now he has some.
Yeah.
But it is still
going backwards. He's got his chin he's like moving away to the left, chin back, leaning back, just moving one direction.
This applies to all of his boxing in that he knows like where things are supposed to end up.
Yeah.
What the target of the shot is, what slot you're supposed to be moving your head into, but he does all of these things in such a way that he's not really in position to follow up with the next move. He tends to throw himself off balance even when he's doing, technically the right things.
I don't trust that Johns has the foot speed to cover distance the way Marlon Moraes did, but it's an interesting thing if Johns can keep pressure, because Johns throws a lot of volume. When he throws 4 or 5 punches.
Mm-hmm.
And if he can just make Sterling pay for being defensively lax there, then he's got
maybe all it takes is a training camp in which John's coaches are just saying, like, okay, the goal is to pressure and put volume on this guy.
Yeah.
And he could do it.
Yeah.
So we'll see, man. I'm excited for this one.
Yep. Next up, middleweight bout, David Branch, Thiago Santos. And I like this fight because Thiago Santos is a wild man, and I will always show up to watch him fight.
Yep.
I don't really see how he wins this fight.
Yeah.
He would if he can knock David Branch out through some Thiago Santos-esque, power kick in the first minute of round 1. Awesome. Amazing. I am 100% down for it. Otherwise, he's very easy to back up and get into really, really bad positions backing up. because his default when he gets backed up is to just swing wild hooks as hard as he can to scare you away. And he gets himself way off balance. He gets himself way off balance chasing, too, with any amount of combination. Like, he throws these huge, fantastic power kicks from the proper kicking range. And then if he has to pursue you with strikes, if he's going to lead beyond that, he's basically falling over. And if he hits you with the punch while he's falling over, it's going to knock every fucking sense out of you you've ever had. And if he doesn't, he's going to throw himself on the floor and then have to recover from there.
Boy, the combos he was throwing in that fight with Anthony Smith were not pretty, but they were insane.
Yeah.
And I give them credit for that.
Yeah, I mean, I picked him against Anthony Smith because Anthony Smith responds so poorly to getting hit. David Branch doesn't, though. David Branch is, he's a low output, cautious, he's not any kind of footwork or technical mastermind leading in combination. But he's very good at pressuring and casing with his takedown game. He did it well against Luke Rockhold early. He did it well against Krzysztof Jotko. And if he can just patiently push Thiago Santos back, Santos will give up all sorts of control. He did it to Gerald Mearshart. He did it to Jack Hermanson. Got hit by Jack Marshman when Marshman was moving forward.
Yeah.
And Branch is a better athlete than any of those three guys. He's a better athlete than anyone that Thiago Santos has beaten lately. And he's just a much more consistent control fighter after that. So if Santos gives up that initial control, Branch is a lot more likely to hold him down and wear him out in ways that when those guys tried to wear Santos out, or when somebody like Gerald Mearshart tries to wear Santos out, he just gasses first because Santos is so powerful.
Yeah.
And I don't see David Branch having that problem. David Branch is like, if you give him a little control, he will just suck the life out of you. So I got to take David Branch here.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with any of that. The X factor here for me, or the thing that's giving me a hang up, is that like Thiago Santos can, well, will he? I don't know how he'll approach it, but he could probably just survive on the ground against David Branch for long stretches of time. Branch is a very technical, well put together grappler, and a good wrestler as well. But when he tends to just kind of like, you watch him on the ground and everyone's always talking like, oh, he's the Renzo Gracie black belt, this and this and that. And then like, he's going to go for the submission in this fight. And then he doesn't. And then in his next fight, they're like, he said he's going to go for the submission in this fight. And then he doesn't. He's very much
control, lockdown position, keep the position. Don't endanger losing the position by doing anything that might be confused with offense.
Yes. And so like, that is not the experience David Branch is going to be having on the feet with Thiago Santos, and it is the experience Thiago's going to have on the ground, which automatically makes me consider Thiago because he could just survive. He could lose 4 rounds and just knock David Branch out in the 5th. That could happen. He's that powerful. He's that dangerous with his striking, and the same is not true for Branch. And I do think too, like Thiago Santos has made some small technical improvements to his striking, especially in the realm of a lot
more. I mean, it's weird to say this after that Anthony Smith fight, but he's gotten a lot more patient and controlled.
Yeah,
with how he attacks.
He has. He picked his spots even in that fight. He had crazy bursts, but he kind of waited till he had Smith hurt before he started going really crazy.
Yeah, and
he did show on several occasions in that fight some nice footwork.
Yeah.
Which we also saw when he fought Marshman and a few other fights. We have seen good lateral movement and tighter angles as his career goes on. And, like things are coming along, but I don't know.
You had to pick him to get that upset KO?
I'm getting nervous. Like we've already disagreed on 4 of 9 fights we've picked. And it's such a slim chance. Like there's such a narrow window here for Thiago Santos, but I'm going to go with David Branch because like, no matter what happens, it seems obvious he's going to spend time on top of Thiago Santos.
Yeah.
He's going to get to have time controlling and just banking minutes and rounds at a time. And that may be enough. Thiago Santos is dangerous, but also like, can he, if he is being controlled on the ground, can he maintain that level of energy into the third round?
Because he tends to fade as fights go too.
He does everything really hard.
Yeah.
Puts a lot of effort into every action. So hopefully Branch's control will just be able to make Santos, hopefully for Branch, will make Santos fight hard enough on the ground that he tires himself out. But if he stays calm, if he plays this like Derek Lewis, he can win this fight at any moment.
Santos is the favorite, in fact. Opened at -185, adjusted up and down to -240, and has risen slowly since then to -204. David Branch opening at +145, adjusting up and down to +170, and moved up to +189, but has fallen back down to +167. I'm pretty surprised because matchup-wise, this seems like a pretty clear-cut fight to me.
Yeah, people just don't know about David Branch. That's really all that is, I think.
Yeah.
They saw him have a really, really boring fight with Krzysztof Jotko, which all of them have now forgotten about.
Yeah.
And then he lost to Luke Rockhold, and they forgot that he looked really good before he lost. So
yeah. And that fight, I mean, the thing with losing to Luke Rockhold is that's all because Luke Rockhold is a better, more aggressive grappler. And Branch could not stop himself from driving into the clinch, where Rockhold would hit him, or eventually started hitting him with harder shots, and was able to turn all those clinch exchanges into the eventual takedown grappling exchange that won him the fight.
Not like that is the only way to beat Branch, but Branch also doesn't know like where his vulnerabilities are. It's the problem, like he doesn't come out of his shell enough to take control of fights, and that's what the issue is going to be here. But he does, he also doesn't leave a lot of openings. He's very controlled.
All right, heavyweight fight next. Chase Sherman, Justin Willis, and Chase Sherman's just going to lose this fight because he's not very good.
You didn't have to say it like that.
I mean, I like him as a person. He seems like a nice guy. He memes
real hard.
He seems like he's been making improvements, but he tends to just walk forward throwing volume and without a lot of power behind it.
Yep. And
you can't really be a low power volume puncher. Like, this is the weird thing. I was thinking about this earlier. And there's a really weird finite strata where being a low powered volume puncher works. It's basically middleweight and then bantamweight and below. And you can't do it at featherweight to welterweight, and you can't do it at light heavyweight or heavyweight. Because
you should be able to do it at heavyweight.
You should,
because if you're durability means a lot, and so does stamina. So like it should work. The problem is like almost everyone who tries to do it at heavyweight sucks at it.
Yeah.
So I mean,
Stipe was able to do it. He's been able to do it at times. So is JDS.
Sure. The problem for Chase Sherman is that like I don't think he's moved his head once in his life. I don't think he's ever nodded in response to a question. I don't think he's ever.
He tried to nod once, and he just bowed.
He tried to nod and fell to his hands and knees, like when Shamil hit him. I don't think he's ever cocked his head to the side and quit. He just cannot defend himself, and like that's a really big issue at heavyweight.
Willis doesn't necessarily move his head into the right spots as he's throwing, but he tends to always move his head as he throws. Yeah, like he tends to like be ducking down and swooping as his hooks come in, and he otherwise. Like, he picks his chin up a little if he tries to throw in long combinations where it could be dangerous, but Chase Sherman hasn't shown enough ability to hit really hard in those kinds of moments. He throws arm punches too much.
Right.
And then otherwise, Willis does a really good job just getting outside and being defensive and minding himself. Like, I was watching, one of the things that struck me on tape is both guys like to counter every single time their opponent throws. The thing with Chase Sherman is, he sees your punch, like he sees the punch starting to come at him, and he'll have his hands up, in good position, and he'll immediately drop his hands to counter with his head on line. So he'll get hit by whatever's coming at him, and then he'll throw arm punches that might connect or might not.
Yeah.
So every time a punch is being thrown at him, he will drop his defense to try to counter it ineffectively. Or,
countering for him is like a flinch response and not in a good way.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, he's throwing, I got to throw now.
Yeah. And for Willis, what you see is Willis will wait until the punch is actually at him, and he has slipped away from it, moved away from it, and then he will come back with the counter punch after the punch has been actually thrown and he has defended it. So the counter, like, yeah, it's not as like snap in the moment. Like, I'm going to counter this exact, the strike even as it's coming at me. There's a little more chance for his opponent to defend the counter or dodge it. But it's also not a counter. It's not a shot where he's just like, oh, I guess I'll just get hit by this and then throw back at it.
Yep.
It's a more defensively responsible style of fighting. And if, as we've seen from Sherman, he's unwilling to do anything other than kickbox in the pocket. So he's just going to, anybody who's a little more defensively responsible than him and can hit harder is going to beat him.
Yeah, and you didn't even mention Justin Willis's wrestling, which is a factor as well. He's an AKA fighter. He's really big and strong. I don't know if he's even actually taller than Chase Sherman, but you will see when they oppose each other in their builds that Justin Willis is a larger man and very powerful, whether he's wrestling or swinging punches. So it just seems like Chase Sherman's going to be working, maybe doing some good things until he's not, and wakes up with a flashlight in his eyes. So
yeah, I mean, there's a reason that Rashad Coulter almost beat Chase Sherman with a dead leg.
Yeah, I think the thing is, I think Chase Sherman really does have the makings of a very capable heavyweight. He's got good stamina. He's durable as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And he's picking up skills pretty quickly. The thing is, I don't know if Jackson Winklejohn's the place to do it, honestly.
No.
What he needs to make this style work is technical striking. And he's not getting that. He's not going to make any great technical strides.
I'm also not sure that his durability is going to hold up.
Well, it definitely won't, because his style is now he has to rely on it in every fight.
Like the durability that carried him a long way against Walt Harris and Justin Ledet and Rashad Coulter and Damian Grabowski. Yeah. Suddenly you're getting slept by Shamil Abdurakhimov, you know? Yeah.
So durability is the worst of all the attributes or assets to rely on, because it's the one that goes away as you rely on it.
Yeah.
You rely on your power, your style might change, your power is always going to be there, but your durability in use will be worn away fight after fight.
Yep.
And he just needs better technique.
Yeah. Because he's still throwing a lot of arm punches. That's why there's no power coming off of him.
Yep. He's not in a position to respond or to avoid.
The only little tricky moment of this I can think is really that he might be a better clinch fighter than Justin Willis, but that might also lead him to getting taken down. And Willis is actually a really, really good at throwing uppercuts from dirty boxing. So it could be a case where Willis leans down into a knee, but Willis will also be cracking with hands in tight.
Sherman's going to have some tricky moves. He's going to have some surprises that he might just pull out of his hat at any moment. But if we look at this from a process perspective, it looks like it's all Justin Willis.
Willis opened at -215, adjusted down to -328, and has stayed pretty much flat there. It's currently at -353, so slowly drifting out. Sherman opened at +165, adjusted up to +283, and is currently at +277. I don't have a big problem with that, frankly. The way Sherman's fighting right now, somebody like Justin Willis is just going to be a big favorite.
Yep.
That takes us to our co-main event, featherweight bout, Frankie Edgar, Cub Swanson. Tell me about it.
Is this the same fight as last time? That's the question we have to ask, because
I don't think we really know. That's the unfortunate thing.
Right.
Is because it honestly, watching tape, it looks like the same fight,
Mm-hmm.
but could it really be the same fight 3 years later?
Yeah. I mean, like, yeah, is it possible that Cub Swanson can't adjust to what was done to him there? But also, like, does it change at all in any way now that Frankie Edgar's been knocked out? Something we have been fearfully waiting for throughout his career, where he's been hurt so many times, has never been stopped, and then Brian Ortega, of all people, is the guy to just blast him in the first round.
Yeah, I mean, Tetsuya Kawajiri took him down when they fought a couple of years, a couple of years after that Frankie Edgar fight, and then he's faced Duho Choi, Artem Lobov, and Brian Ortega in the time since. So we have no idea if Cub Swanson's takedown defense in that way has improved.
Yeah, the only wrestling we've seen from Cub Swanson since Frankie Edgar, like we saw him get taken down and get stuck in positions by Hakran Diaz a few times.
Artem Lobov took him down, actually, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, so like it feels like the same fight.
Yep.
And if it is, like, if these things aren't a factor, then Frankie Edgar's going to win it. Frankie Edgar's really, really good at doing what he does. He's a very capable boxer, getting better still as his career goes on, maybe losing some speed and some energy. Certainly now it seems like he's losing some durability as well. But technically, he is the best boxer he's ever been in his career right now. And he is still the guy who doesn't need to rely on it to win fights. The beauty of Frankie Edgar's boxing is, and always has been, that it sets up his takedowns and vice versa. He's probably going to box with Cub Swanson a bit. Cub is going to land some shots, maybe some big ones, maybe a few big flashy kicks to change the tone early on this time around. And then Frankie's going to hit a weak takedown and bail on it. And then he's going to figure out how Cub forced him to bail on it. And then he's going to hit Cub for doing that the next time he goes for that takedown. And then he's going to hit that takedown. And it's just going to be a flow chart to destruction. So Frankie Edgar, if it's the same fight, then the same guy's going to win, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the best, most functional Cub Swanson is always the guy who can kind of square up in front of his opponent and get creative and have, like, middle kickboxing range.
Yeah, slowly stalk forward without changing angles on Cub Swanson, and you will see some beautiful striking.
Exactly. And that's just not, like, Edgar can always use that to get takedowns. I mean, we even saw against a much faster, fleeter-footed striker in Yair Rodriguez flying around, and Frankie Edgar was just able to track him down immediately and trap him against the fence and pick him up and take him down and do that all night. And that was Frankie Edgar's last fucking fight before the Brian Ortega loss. You know? This isn't like Brian Ortega changed the game permanently. I doubt. I mean, that's probably a fight Frankie Edgar did not want to have on the ground, and it's also a fight he was winning on the feet until he wasn't. So,
Cub Swanson's good on the ground. Can Cub Swanson terrify Frankie Edgar out of his first takedown attempt by attacking a Darce?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
Like, it's just not the same opponent.
No.
Even if Cub's a good striker.
Yeah, I got to take Frankie Edgar in this all the way. And I think Cub will probably have some success very early and then just get dragged into a Frankie Edgar ground war, which, you know, a land war in China, as they say.
Yeah, and Cub's problem on the ground, like, Cub is a good grappler, but I do think he's struggled consistently with people who can lock him in position.
Yeah.
Who can, like, even off of his back, he had some moves against Dustin Poirier, but if you can just, like, flatten Cub out, don't even try to improve position past a certain point, which for Frankie Edgar is half guard, then he's just going to be stuck there.
All right. I think we're pretty agreed on that, frankly. Like, it just...
Yeah, I kind of want it to be different. I want
it to be like Jimmy Manuwa versus Jan Blachowicz too.
Oh my god!
Like, wow, this is a totally fucking different fight.
Nothing will ever be that good again, Zane.
But anyway,
full steam ahead into the main event.
Odds on that: Frankie Edgar is the favorite. Opened at -230, adjusted up and down to -216, went up to -204, and has drifted back down ever since, taking a dive in the past couple of days. Currently down to -226. Cub Swanson opened at plus 170, moved up to plus 180, and dropped down as low as plus 174. Been moving up in the past couple days, is now up at plus 183. So I'm totally comfortable with that. I'm comfortable with it being wider, honestly. I mean, it's been, Cub Swanson's got good hands, but he's also, like, his last knockout is Dennis Seaver in 2013. So
yeah, it's just, it's the same fight.
Yep. That brings us to our main event now. Edson Barboza versus Kevin Lee. And I am really interested in this fight a lot, honestly, because there are specific things about Kevin Lee's game that I really don't like that much, especially standing and striking and the way he transitions to his wrestling. Mostly, I don't think that Kevin Lee's actually a very good shot wrestler. Like, he's not a very good pursuing, pressuring wrestler. He's a wrestler who, if he can get you in on if he can get the count reactive shot, then he can hit that really well. Otherwise, he's gonna, like, you kind of have to bring the wrestling game to him, and then he can really expose you there.
Yeah.
Like his fight with Michael Chiesa actually took Kevin Lee down. And
it was Kevin Lee's fight from the moment he got taken down.
Yeah.
Weirdly.
And Francisco Trinaldo took Kevin Lee down. Yep. And then he got put on his back as well, but it was not, like, Kevin Lee isn't an instantly unbreakable shot wrestler. His boxing doesn't really set him up to be. Like, the way he kickboxes doesn't really lead to his wrestling very well. So he either has to just maybe it's fair to say he's a good shot wrestler, but if you're not setting up any of your shots, it doesn't really matter how good a wrestler you are unless you're Khabib Nurmagomedov, which is interesting against Edson Barboza, because Edson Barboza's takedown defense is good. It is not bad. There's very little wrong with the way Edson Barboza defends takedowns. He limp legs out of things. He has good footwork to keep takedowns off of him. He searches for underhooks against the fence. It's a fine, solid, basic, strong takedown defense game. So it may be hard for Kevin Lee to actually get Edson Barboza down just in open space off of a normal fight, because Kevin Lee's, like I say, his pressure is really inconsistent. He's not a consistent pressure threat, in the kind of way that breaks Edson Barboza down. On the flip side, for Edson Barboza, there's still a little sense that I think Edson Barboza is the kind of fighter where he just kind of expects everything to just work fine for him.
How do you mean?
Like, I think it's a very, like, traditional Muay Thai kind of style of, like, I'm going to step in with this combo, and I'm going to hit you harder than you hit me, and I'm going to be right here, and you can try and hit me back, but it's fine. Like, it's just going to be fine. I will be fine. Whatever
he's still
happens.
Got a little, he's for such like a slick, like rhythmic, smooth looking striker. He still has a bit of that roteness to his style.
Yeah.
Where it still kind of feels like preset moves. Like, he's not always responding to what's actually happening in the exchange.
Like, he'll just step in with, like, a hard 1-2 low kick and just be, like, right there, like, looking at you, and just get clocked.
He decides all 3 punches before he throws the first one.
Yeah.
And if you happen to adjust for the third punch and hit him with a counter, he's often not ready for it.
Yeah, and he always there always seems to be this sort of unreadiness about it. Like, oh, you're actually going to hit me? Because I thought I'd be fine. It's
been getting better for years. I mean, even now, I think he's still improving in that regard, where, like, it's clear that 2 years ago, Barboza would have been finished in the first round by Khabib Nurmagomedov. The fact that he was able to survive and fight his way back into the fight in the third does say a lot about where he's at mentally, but it's still a problem.
Yeah. So, and Kevin Lee, especially with his kicking game, his boxing game is one shot at a time outside. Yeah. It's fine. It works all right for what it is. He can counter and he can lead a little, but it's not a combination striking game. It's not anything to really take advantage of Edson Barboza's gaps, honestly.
Speaking of watching your work,
yeah,
when Kevin Lee throws punches, he really likes to admire what he's just done and gets punished for it.
And so I honestly don't think that the kind of striking Kevin Lee does is really going to punish Edson Barboza in any real way. Like, the best Kevin Lee strikes, honestly, like, it's his kicking game, and especially his ability to change up with snapping head kicks, where he'll just he throws kicks into his boxing in ways that are totally off time and unexpected. And he does that well. But I don't know. I'm really
feels like you're leaning towards Barboza, Zane.
I'm gonna pick Edson Barboza here, honestly. Like, I just don't see enough of the kind of pressure game that beats Edson Barboza out of Kevin Lee. And maybe he catches Barboza just, looking and being like, oh, I threw these 2 punches and I threw this low kick and all that. And now I'm right here and I'm just like waiting to see what happens.
And Lee has power.
And getting clocked. Yeah, he's got good power. He's got the power to do it. And if he hurts Barboza, he'll certainly chase him down and drag him to the mat.
Oh, yeah.
He could finish him there. Like, it's a hard fight to call, because I do believe that if Kevin Lee gets Edson Barboza down, he will probably just beat him. Like, Kevin Lee's grappling and wrestling game are really, really good.
Yeah.
Unquestionably. It's just, I don't see enough of the consistent striking game to just pick it off that alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not gonna in this case.
I think you're right. Like, Kevin Lee, it's weird that Kevin Lee could be a guy who loses to Edson Barboza here, and I would still think of him as like maybe the one in the division to beat Khabib, like on a consistent way. That the problem is like the difference between Kevin Lee and Khabib is really the pressure. Lee has been comparing himself to Khabib lately. Like, it's clear in this division, if there are 2 dudes you do not want to grapple with, it's these guys. Even Tony Ferguson's more forgiving. There are people who can play top position who know, oh, he'll play on the bottom. And I can kind of find some openings there. I can get some shots in. Kevin Lee, like we said, like, he got taken down by Michael Chiesa, and that's when he started winning the fight. Instantly swept him, instantly got on top. He gave Tony Ferguson a ton of issues on the ground before gassing in the second. He's super tight, control-oriented grappler.
With lots of power. He hits really hard when he gets good positions and can lock
very
up
much
really
like
submissions.
Very much like Khabib in how he locks down positions, but kind of clearly like more powerful with his shots from those positions. Damages people. Khabib will hit you with the same shot and gets good leverage into him, but doesn't seem to have a lot of natural power. Kevin Lee does. Like, he fucks people up when he hits them on the ground, and that's strength too. Like, that, he's also just very physically strong in scrambles, in tie-ups, in the clinch, in takedowns. Like, he's not a great takedown artist, but he dumps people all the time because he can just pick most lightweights up above his head. And like that, so he could get Edson into those positions Khabib got Edson into if he could pressure Edson. Because Edson's problem in that fight wasn't just the wrestling. No. He defended the wrestling pretty well.
Yeah.
Even after getting exhausted in the late rounds of that fight, he was stopping and escaping from takedowns against the fence, where Khabib is really good. But it was the pressure. Like, it was the fact that Khabib was just in his face, that he had to keep dealing with takedowns over and over. And when he wasn't, he couldn't get his striking going because Khabib was out striking him. And Kevin Lee is not going to give him that kind of fight. I would be very surprised if Lee put that kind of pressure on Barboza. And if he does, it'll only happen in bursts. And Barboza can deal with that. So,
yeah.
you know, like
one of the big problems I realized for why Barboza deals so poorly with pressure, and this may be, in fact, the entire reason, he can't circle to his right.
Yeah. His footwork falls apart. He can
take one step to his right, like he'll cut one angle out to his right, and then he has to stop and plant, and then he'll just go back to circling to his left endlessly.
Yeah. He's got like, well, it's a problem a lot of boxers have. He's got a very boxing style, working behind his jab, and it's much easier for an orthodox fighter to move to the left just by nature of how the body's put together when you stand left foot forward. But Barboza is like particularly limited to that. Like he gets really caught in this chase.
Yeah, and it lets people who want to pressure him, like they just know if I chase him, he's always going to be moving in only this one direction, so I can just run after him.
Yeah, and the trick for Barboza, like would be to then like stop in your tracks, throw the right hand as they're circling into it. But
he tries to do that. I mean, he sits down. He'll just be like, okay, I'm going to brawl and try to get you off of me.
But the problem is because he only feels comfortable moving to his left. Once he starts moving to his left, it's like a snowball. It's like, okay, I'm running faster and faster and faster and faster. He puts himself more and more out of position to do those kinds of things, to set traps. And so he just starts. But you have to pressure Barboza to get him playing your game on the feet. Otherwise, you have to be a more technical long-range striker than him.
Yep.
And Lee isn't.
No.
So, like, yeah, at any moment, like you said, if he hurts Barboza, if he just gets Barboza tied up and gets 1 for 2 at his takedown, Kevin Lee is powerful enough and skilled enough on the ground that he could, and more of an aggressive submission artist than Khabib. So, like, he could just end up in the positions Khabib had and get a finish quickly rather than having to keep going to those positions for 3 rounds. But if he doesn't do that, then I think Barboza is going to kind of pick him apart on the feet. We will see here with 5 rounds to work, depending on whether each of these guys stops it and when. But we will see how much Kevin Lee's staph infection had to do with his poor stamina against Tony Ferguson. I do think it was a significant factor. But we've never seen him in another 5-round fight, and he seems to cut a lot of weight. He's a very muscular lightweight. We will see. That's something I'm interested in, to see if the pace gets to him.
Yep.
But if it does, it's just going to be even worse for him. So, yeah, I agree with you. I'm going with Barboza.
There you have it. Odds on the fight, Edson Barboza is the underdog. Opened at -135, adjusted to -101, has been trending slowly up, except in the last day where it spiked up. It's now +130. Kevin Lee opened at -105, adjusted up and down to -130. He's been more or less plateaued there until the last day where it's dropped to -156. So I'm fine with that. I get why Lee's favored.
Yep.
I think he's got a great chance to win. I don't like the way he matches up with Barboza standing at all.
It's purely a style thing. Because like I said, Kevin Lee, being who he is right now, I think has a better shot than most of beating Khabib, because Khabib would bring the grappling to him. And like that's really the issue I see here, is that I just don't think he can consistently bring the grappling to Edson Barboza.
Yep.
Nervous about this card, Zane. We have dissented on a lot of fights here, and it feels like even the ones we agreed on, we were frequently agreeing on the underdog. So,
yeah, it's a well-booked card. It's a fun fight card. It should be fun to watch.
Yep.
On that note, you can find me on Twitter at TheZenTime. You can find Connor on Twitter at BoxingBush. You can find both of us over at BloodyElbow.com all week, all the time, all year, whenever. Give us a thumbs up. That's the like down there. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, MMANation.com, DOTCOM, all spelled out. Both those things help us a ton. I swear to God. I swear to the God I don't believe in. And we will be back next week for another episode of the MMA Depressed Us. Next 2 weeks, in fact, on the run-up to UFC 224, Nunes versus Pennington. And we'll also have all our normal shows. If I Did It, Heavy Hands, 6-Round Retro, all that stuff. So thanks, everyone, for tuning in, and we will see you next time.